record.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to episode number 3 of Shattering the Stigma, our 5-part series on addressing and understanding mental health in organizations. I am Jen Trum, your co-host for the series, and along with me is Christy. Hi, Christy.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome, and we are incredibly excited today to have a special guest with us today. Peter, is it Harrell?
Harrell.
Harrell, yay!
Yes.
Well, welcome so much, Peter. We are incredibly excited to have you here. Would you mind sharing with us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. I'm happy to see everybody today and happy to have everybody hear me. My background is 30 years plus in communication skills training. My background is mainly the foundation of all my training is effective communication, which of course you may have seen on Thrive. I did a piece for them about 1.5 years ago about effective communication. I was teaching classes 30 years ago that you're just hearing about now. I had classes, generational classes, teaching other generations to talk together. I had cultural classes that talked about race and gender. And I had a class called Gender Communication that was created 26 years ago that I have updated and just been asked to do for the state comptroller again this summer. So part of my background, of course, is a couple of you, Christy knows, of course, is I have a 48-year history of acting. Fortunate enough to do 2 major series, which you probably don't know the names of, but I'll tell you anyway. One was Trapper John, one was Friday Night Lights.
Nice.
Okay, so, and I've been in Mexico for the past 4 years, and I have been speaking across Mexico. I'm a member of the biggest Rotary Club here in Mexico. So when they found out the kind of work that I've been doing for the past 3 decades, of course, I am a speaker. So I'm happy to be here with you today and to answer any questions you may have about my background or what I do. But I just will tell you that I'm the one they called when something went wrong. I tried to get people to see that training happens before you do something wrong, but training costs money. So that was always the last thing they wanted to spend money on until something went south. And they would call me and for whatever sexual harassment, whatever effective communication that nobody was doing. But I think it's so important these days to continue to do the work that I do. I don't have to tell you what's going on in the world today, but I will tell you something that I just read. Empathy, which is the foundation of all my training, empathy is inherently biased. Evidence shows that we are less likely to empathize with people who are from different racial and cultural groups than our own, merely by virtue of who they are, not based on anything they've done. Such bias only exacerbates the problematic prejudice that is causing dysfunction in the workplace and throughout our society. So if I had to do a new mission statement, it would be on teaching more effective communication. And I've been talking to public schools about this throughout Mexico. Effective communication needs to start around the 5th grade, 4th or 5th grade, and continue through high school, continue through whatever your secondary part of education you go through, and actually continue through your life. Because one of the things that I'm going to be developing for Thrive, and I've talked to Christy about this, is a class on resiliency. Resiliency for whatever age you are. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Gen Z, if Gen X, baby boomers are still in the workplace, it works for them as well. It works for millennials. It works for everyone. But I would suggest if any company was going to take any of my work, they would do the effective communication class that I've already provided. Well, it is a class, but the 10 scenarios I did on Thrive is a great starting point for any, especially new employee. Yeah. New employees need communication training immediately, not a year later, not 6 months later, not 3 months later, because in 6 months, they're probably gone.
Right.
A lot of the time in 3 months, they're gone. So that's my little spiel for right now, and I'll take any questions or fill in any gaps that anybody may have and move on.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So everyone, we're really excited to have Peter here today. Like you said, he has a lot of experience working with many different types of companies and people on improving communication. So with that, please, anytime during this webinar, if you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat below, and we will answer those as they come, both the chat and the Q&A. Whichever is easier, just let us know, and we will answer your questions as they come. All right, and so we're going to really, Peter, one of the things I'd like to start with, if it's okay with you, is you just mentioned for as new employees come into an organization, how to kind of make that a part of the training process and how to introduce new employees in a way that will make them effective communicators throughout the course of their employment. Do you have any thoughts on how to do that?
Well, like I said, these courses that have to do with communication should be taught first, mainly because people haven't learned it at home, obviously. They have not learned it in their high schools or in their colleges. I was appalled at how few effective communication classes there are on the college level. Right. If they are on the college level, and this is not all colleges, of course, but if they're on that level, they're canned courses, they're courses taught by doctors of education, which some of my best friends, I should say, are PhDs. However, my broad experience cuts across all lines, whatever educational process you've been through, whether you just graduated from high school, graduated from college, wherever you are. I've taught many PhDs, and they've actually told me that they've learned something. So I'm pretty impressed, but my training style, as you may understand, is I don't pull any punches. I talk about the tough subjects, because if we don't talk about the tough subjects, whatever they may be, Bud Light, we seem to keep going down these same paths that have led us to not talking to anyone. I've given classes to people with all political persuasions, all faith or spiritual persuasions, because my class has to do really with, when you really break it down, it has to do with who you are as a person. How do you want the world to see you? How do you want your family to see you? What do you want to represent? Because as I'm so fond of telling people, from the time you go to work, people are watching you from the time you get out of your car and listening to you. They're watching and listening throughout the day. And sometimes they talk about you when you're gone, because you have no effective communication. You talk at people, you don't talk to people or with people. So really the empathy part, which is, I know it's all over everywhere now, but that's been my linchpin for 30 years. You start with empathy, and most people don't have it. That's the interesting thing about it, because again,
why is that, Peter?
That is because they haven't been shown it around the dinner table, to be quite frank with you, because all communication, now, there is no dinner table these days anymore. People eat on the run or standing up. People don't talk to each other. They're ships passing in the night. And I'm a social media guy, but I tell you, I just can't tell you how many adults, teenagers, middle-aged people who, when they come face to face, can't really express themselves because of all these other I think I sent you a couple of slides. One of them is the cultural iceberg. And all you see with people is the tip of the iceberg. Everything underneath, do you want to get to what that is? Well, there's only one way to get to what that is, and that's through communication. Now, I've tell other people at the workplace this. The workplace is not someone where you come and talk all day, somewhere you go to work. But when you come to my class, you have an opportunity to say things that you really don't say in the workplace. I tell people, treat me like a priest, because what happens in this room doesn't leave this room. This class is not for your boss. It's not for your wife. It's for you, and how to adjust your moral compass if you think or even know what that is. And I usually explain to people because some people don't quite get what true north is. But you'll see a slide. The second slide I sent was called Circle of Influence and Circle of Concern.
Peter, are you able to pull those up to show people?
I sent them to you, but I can
I'm not able to.
look for them real
It's
quick.
okay if not. We can describe them if not.
Well, now I'll just explain it. If you had a pen and a pencil, you draw a large circle and you draw a rather small circle on the inside. The large circle is your circle of everything you're concerned about. You're concerned about politics. You're concerned about your family. You're concerned about your relatives. You're concerned about all these things, but that little small circle in the middle is the only thing you have total control over. Now, what are those things? Well, I have total control over what I put in my mouth every day. I have total control on what I drink every day. I have total control on how I approach every human being that I see every day. You see, because when I meet someone new or even old acquaintances, my first thing is I want to show empathy. Now, I don't have to go through that in my mind after 30 years. It's automatic. But I'm starting to think, let me put myself in these other people's shoes, not so I can walk a mile, just a few steps. But the most important thing, and I spent a whole lot of time on this, and not enough time is spent on it, is what I call involved listening. None of us listen none of us listen. Most of us don't listen. So we hear about 50 or 30% of what's being said. We go off and we do the wrong thing and come back and go, here you go. And the person goes, that's not what I asked you to do. Well, yes, it is. And then you go back and forth. I have asked people 6 times before, what did you say? You know, I used to ask my boss of this 10,000 people facility. He would get very perturbed with me. He says, well, I already told you, didn't you hear me? And I said, well, guess what? I'm trying to do the best job. So I'm going to ask you until I have a complete understanding of what you just said. Can you go with me with that? Most people will do that. Most people would do that. But the biggest thing I teach is this. We're all from different cultures. You can be from a different culture growing up in the same family. You can be from different cultures growing up. There's cultures within cultures everywhere. But the thing about culture is very simple. You have to approach culture just like if you could remember back to when you were trying to learn things, when you were very small, you were curious about everything. But you see what has happened, everybody's got these layers these days. They don't want to hurt people's feelings. They don't know what to say, so they don't say anything. So you go through life never knowing certain cultures that would enrich your life, and it would certainly enrich theirs, because you have drank the Kool-Aid that we have been fed about communication. Well, I'll communicate with you if you have more money, because you have status. I'll communicate with you because, well, you're my doctor and I have to. I'll communicate, and most of the time people won't even ask doctors the right questions. They'll just sit up and listen. So what I try to do is let people be a sponge and teach them how to be a sponge. And that sponge is called empathy. And I don't know how you go anywhere without it, but we've had, again, so much Kool-Aid about how we're all so different. And of course we are different. But the point of it is not the differences. The point of it is, can we sit in a room and talk to each other without going ballistic on just about any subject? I have friends of different religions. I have friends of different political persuasions. We talk politics, religion. We talk about everything. You know why? Because we can agree to disagree agreeably. We have lost that art. I'm trying to bring it back.
So for companies and individuals on the call, assuming that most people, if not all people on the call, haven't seen your effective communication series yet, two things I'd really love to unpack for them. First and foremost, if they're in a culture of not having a lot of empathy, or if personally you struggle maybe with empathy and communication, because that is a learned skill over time. First, I would say any tips that you can share on how to do that, really how to bring into the workplace.
The first, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
The first thing I suggest people do is get over your damn self. Now, what do I mean by that? That means that you have to be willing to step outside yourself to become vulnerable. That is one of the hardest things to do with empathy, because we don't want to show vulnerability. It doesn't matter if you're male, female, whatever. Doesn't have anything to do, that part doesn't have anything to do with the different sexes or different genders. It has to do with you have been brainwashed into thinking that your culture is the only one. Now, it's not the only one, but of course, we all feel more comfortable when everybody in the room looks like us. But how many rooms did we go to? This is in the 1950s. How many rooms are there where everybody is different these days? Very different, if you get my drift. So a manager, and I have a whole manager series on how to not run employees off, because my statistics and my data show, especially with Gen Z, 14% of them quit in about the first 30 days. You know why they do it?
Why is that?
Because how they're talked to.
Yes.
Who wants to talk to someone? First of all, if you're in another generation, it might behoove you to not sit up with people in your same generation and go, well, these people, I don't know. We weren't like that when we grew up, and I don't understand this, and I don't understand. Hey, that's
Not helping.
Yeah, no.
But that's what we
more
do.
divide.
Exactly. We sit up and talk about each other more than we talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I know my when I have people in, especially when I have them in the room, they're in the room, they can't go anywhere. And 80% of the people who come to my effective communication, or gender classes, or whatever they may be, 80% tell me when they're leaving, I didn't want to come to class today. And that's another problem in companies. Why don't you want to go to class? Why wouldn't you want to get training that is practically free to help you out in, you know why? Because the trainers, and I don't want to denigrate trainers as a whole, but trainers are not willing to talk about the things that everybody's talking about at home. Right. That's the deal. I don't come in and give fluff and cloudy stuff, but if you look at, when you see my presentation on Thrive, you'll see it's bullets. My classes are not about why and theory and all that. I'll give you a bit of it. My classes are how to. How do you attain empathy? How can you communicate better? How can you accept other cultures, other gender identifications, which is so large right now. But you know what about gender identification? It always has been. But the majority can be the majority, and the minority can be the minority in anything. But here's the pure fact of everything. We all have to live and work together. And at this time in society where there's so much separatism, I feel that anything I can do to give the how-to, the nuts and bolts, is more important than giving you big, long histories and giving you a lot of theory about all that stuff. No, I love to tell people, when you get out of here today, you'll have 10 things you can start doing tonight with your family. Or you'll have 10 things to start doing tomorrow at work. Now, and I love telling people, these are just words I'm saying. You feel good in class, but what are you going to do? Which, see, that involves moral compass. What are you going to actually do about it? Are you just going to come to class, give me a good evaluation, tell the people back at work it's a great class, blah, blah, blah. Then you go back and revert to doing the same thing you've always done, getting the same results you've always gotten.
So can we actually talk about, like, because I know most of the people on the call today, for the most part, I don't mean to cut out anyone, but most people on the call are HR leaders and are
Okay.
people in the HR profession. So I know what I've heard from people oftentimes is it's hard to make those organizational changes as just one person or just as one small team. So I'm sure there are a number of reasons why those things are challenging, and why, changing communication and changing empathy and styles of speaking to each other for a whole organization are challenging. So I guess I would say, for the people on the call, again, assuming they don't have access to any of your content, what would you tell them that they could do, today, if they're willing to kind of steer the ship in that right direction?
Good question.
Thanks.
You're all HR people, I hear, who are listening to this. My wife was an HR manager and worked in HR for 30 years. We worked together doing training, and HR was always together. Here's the deal. Send your leadership to training. Don't send your employees to training. I'll say it again real slow, because a lot of people don't get it. Send your leadership to training. Because here's the deal. If they're not willing to go to training, what are you holding training for? If the employees can't see the top brass coming, going through a training with them or without them, but coming and getting these tips, because frankly, I'm gonna tell you something. What I found out in my experience, most people rise to the top without these skills. They know somebody. It's a good old boy, good old girl network. People can't see, they put people in at manager and leadership who have not had manager and leadership training. And here we go. So we keep getting the same results we keep getting. Now, you can't make your leadership go to training. I get that. But I did. In an agency of 10,000 people, I taught a class called Verbal Judo for almost 10 years, because we were teaching, it was corrections, and we were teaching our employees how to talk most effectively to get their, we don't call them inmates, but to get the clients who came to that facility. It's a juvenile correction facility. How to talk to them where you can get them to do what you want. And isn't that what most people want in life? Because all day long, we're asking people to do things.
Right.
All day long, they're asking us to do things. It's how we ask. And I have found that when I do have only leaders in the room or talk to leadership, I'll just ask the question, how many of you went through leadership training? They'll raise their hands. How much of that leadership training had to do with, I'll start listing: gender communication, generational communications, cultural communications. And then the hands start to go down because those classes didn't contain that. There's a big push now not to do these kind of, for lack of a better word, cultural initiatives. Okay, that's fine. But those people who don't want to do those, I find to be in a time machine from 1951. Because the workplace, as all of you can attest to, has changed so drastically. If you don't make any changes in your training, you're not going to have anybody there. The only people who are going to be there are people you don't want there, because they've been there, and they cause what I like to refer to nicely as dead weight. They don't make the company go anywhere. They're marking time till they retire. They're not motivated. Why should they? Because they've been talked to like, you know what? Why should they be motivated? Well, this is what I call quit and stay. You don't quit and leave. you quit and stay, which
Right.
stagnates the pond, stagnates the culture. Companies have a hard time moving on. Now, I'm not saying that everybody who's new to your company is going to have the best ideas in the world. They think they do. A whole bunch of them think they do. And of course, they won't have to tell, especially Gen Z and even some millennials. I'm sorry, but a lot of people who are still in charge, they're not going to promote you in 1 year unless you do something so incredibly amazing that they just can't ignore it, which is another thing I tell people to do. Make your boss look good. When you make your boss look good, everything's hunky-dory. You go to work, you feel good. When you talk to people the right way, you go to work, you feel good. You go, you know what? I can't wait to get back to work tomorrow. And I can't wait to get my 20 or my 10 or my 15 or whatever your goal is. Most people stay in a job less than 3 years now. We all know that. And you may not, you may have people who have moved 5 and 10 times before they got to you. But yet and still, if you want to retain employees, employee retention, there has to be some changes made. And it usually comes from upper and middle level management.
Right.
You can't expect people to communicate well when they haven't been taught. This is what I tell in all my classes. If I'm taught you how to swim and I say, go jump over there in the lake, you may do it because I'm very persuasive, but it's not going to be a good day for you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to hear from the people on the webinar today. If you all can put in the chat or in the Q&A, kind of where your company is at in terms of communication, in terms of empathy, if they're willing to talk about, challenging topics, which I would assume, it's just my guess that most aren't as much. So if we can just hear from you all what that looks like today, and we can kind of go from there and kind of build on that, and just understand where you all are at. So please put in the chat or the Q&A below and just let us know what's happening at your company.
Well, while we wait for any brave souls, one of the things
Chat is disabled. It says,
What's
sorry to interrupt you, Jen. It says chat is disabled.
Oh, shoot.
So that's okay. Maybe just go
maybe
ahead
just in Q&A and we'll get that.
Yeah, Q&A is fine. So if chat's not working, sorry about that. Just go ahead and put any questions or notes in the Q&A and we can read them. Let us know if you want them to be read anonymously, and we're happy to do that. So yeah, thank you for letting us know.
Yes.
About that.
Thank you. So while we wait, one thing that you said earlier, Peter, really gave me like a ping in my chest. Years ago, I was the HR department of one for an organization that we were, there was talking the talk around wanting to make some shifts culturally, right? In terms of communication and, bringing in, different schools of thought. Then when it came down to it, the senior leaders were kind of sitting around in a circle with their arms crossed saying, no, that's you guys, you guys do it. And so I wonder if you can speak to that, because at the time, I think I didn't really have the awareness to basically kind of understand, how there's kind of the spheres of what you can and can't control, right? And as an HR professional, I think myself and so many others out there, we want to be able to make an impact, right? That's why we do what we do and got into what we, where we're at. But unfortunately, the reality is there is only so much that you can control. And when you're in a situation or a circumstance that the hires be do not have an interest really in changing their own mindset, right? They believe that needs to happen with the peons or whatever. I think that's something that, one of the things that I work on is helping to coach, women in particular, but people in HR, to help them recognize the point where they need to stand up and know where really what it is that they most want to offer isn't being served, and walk away at what point. So I kind of, that was a little bit of a run on, but I'd love if you can speak to kind of being in that situation where you recognize that in order to make the change, the real change that needs to happen within this organization, there are factors factors that are going to be outside of our control?
Well, I don't do a lot of training in rooms anymore, but the way I got this across is I would train whole management teams before I train anybody else, because I can get them in a room and shame them into admitting that they don't know everything about leadership. I can do that within 5 minutes with about 3 questions and find out who really knows what they're doing. Are you, like you say, just sitting up talking the talk?
Mm-hmm.
It's harder when you're trying to do it as an HR leader and you're trying to convince these people. You're at the table, you're at the big table with all the movers and shakers, people who decide things, and you're trying to tell them what they need for training. What I like to do is give people statistics, because statistics have to do with bottom lines. Statistics have to do with how your company is actually performing. Do you really want your company to perform better? Or do you, I work with this, yeah, because that's a question. I've worked with places where people, they spend $15,000 on 2 or 3 weeks, have a bunch of trainings come in, spend all this money on training, they're gone in 30 days. And you do exit interviews with these people, and the biggest thing about it, and this is what I can't get leaders to understand, they quit not because of the infrastructure, not because there was bad lighting, not because the equipment was bad or whatever, not really even because of the people. They quit because some supervisor, manager, or someone in leadership simply didn't talk to them like they were a human being. I know that's harsh to say, but I'm sure everybody who's listening to this message has gone through the same thing with people in leadership and management. So I simply ask leadership and management, do you want your company to work? Are you interested in, making any more money than you're making now? You're just willing to stay right where you are and go backwards? Because here's what's happening, especially with Gen Z and millennials. They're bringing values to work. See, it's not like it was 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, where people go, oh, I'm scrambling to get this job, and I really don't care what it is. No. People want to know about work-life balance more than ever. Mm-hmm. Can I get promoted in a year? There's nothing wrong with that question. You don't have to get all snarky about it and say that doesn't work here. We don't do that and all that mess. What does that do? Because see, you only have a certain pool to pick from. Right. Now, when these people quit and leave, when they quit and leave, do you not understand leadership that they go and tell one other person? Just one. That's all they have to do is tell one other person. And then before you know it, that pool where you were hiring from, where you get a bunch of people talking amongst themselves, don't go over there. Because Sally, let me tell you what just happened to Sally. Let me just say what happened to Jim when they went over there. Let me tell you how they would talk to over there. Let me tell you how they were treated. See, all this stuff I'm talking about has nothing to do with the work or work product. It simply has to do with what comes out of your mouth. And I gotta admit, it's a hard deal. I've turned down work from so many companies, and they haven't gone with me for this exact reason, because I'm not going to give canned courses. I'm not going to get in there so you could check off something to say somebody went to training. Because one thing I'm always asking leadership, let me ask you a question. What was the benefit of the training you gave? Then they go, well, they got trained. I go, okay, did work improve? Did your product improve? Well, and see, they hem and haw because they can't answer those questions. Nobody does the proper evaluations with training most of the time anyway, except very few people. 5 levels of evaluation, and maybe you'd be 6 for all I know now. But you have to do these beyond smile sheets. And that's a part of training that's not done, because how much money do we waste on training? You HR folks, how much money is wasted on training? I brought in 7 habits of highly effective people probably 25 years ago to this agency. The whole leadership changed because they came first, They could actually see value in this. And they said, well, you know what? I want my middle level managers to all have this so they can start pushing this down. Now, did it totally work? Of course, no. No training totally works. But you got to give people a place. Why do you think people love going to Google? Well, besides the money, of course. It's the environment. Any of the big major companies you see, you look at their environments and you look at these other environments that are 20 years in the past. Oh, we don't want you to work remotely because, see, you might be going to the store when you're supposed to be working, or you might be doing other things. Hello, it's 2023.
Right.
It's 2023. Why can't people work remotely? I work for one of the most forward-thinking companies in Texas called the Comptroller. Now, the Comptroller was different. State Comptroller is different. They have a lot of money. Matter of fact, I'm doing some classes for them in the summer period. But here's the thing about the Comptroller. They were letting people off 2 days 27 years ago to work remotely from home.
Wow.
27 years ago, nobody was buying into that. Nobody was saying, I had to fight 25 years ago to do a stress class. Well, Peter, why can't we send them to stress class at 8 and have them come back at 12? Well, this might be a class that they might need, several more hours. And plus, why would you have people jump up, get in their car, drive to training, then hurry up and have to get back at work at 1? But see, that was the mindset until leadership started dying of stress. You see, things usually don't change until something very bad happens. Then people go, oh, I understand now. Well, I'm trying to get people to understand before these negative things occur.
Yeah, and I find it interesting. I mean, especially using Google as an example, understanding that most likely most people on the call don't have the financial means that Google has. It really sounds like, and what's striking to me is that it's not necessarily about, providing a bunch of money for lunch, free lunch every day. And, those things. It's really about how you treat people and how people feel like a person. Because even at those big companies, it might be attractive for employees who are joining those big companies, but oftentimes the way that they're treated within the companies is not necessarily helping them stick around. So, that's not to say that just because your company doesn't have the resources that someone like Google has, it's really just about showing employees that you care about them, because oftentimes employees are seen as just a number, unfortunately. And so really showing them that you care about who they are, you treat them in a way that you would want to be treated, which comes back to empathy, right, Peter? And kind of building that culture of understanding where everyone's at and that everyone is working towards a collective goal as a company. And, if leadership can't get on board with that, then, there has to be some kind of communication that this comes back to effective communication, how to effectively communicate to that leadership who just doesn't see necessarily the value in that, when so much research shows that that's really the way to go, right?
Well, and like you said, Peter, like earlier, it's really about like having the confidence to be honest, right? And speak up and say, hey, you know what, this is a problem and here's why. And with that data and, information. And I think so often, I know being in HR for so many years, it almost can be paralyzing, right? Like to put out that level of, confidence about, well, what if I'm wrong? Like there's a lot of mind drama, I think, sometimes that goes into being that advocate for the employee when, you're kind of in the middle piece. What advice would you give to, people in HR, people who have that role, that potential of being able to kind of make that impact, but sometimes maybe they hold back for fear of, judgment or, kind of going too far. And so there seems to be, I've talked to so many others who kind of know what that experience is like. There seems to be kind of this hesitation from really speaking out and being more truthful, maybe for that fear of, oh no, once that gets out there, what does that mean? So love to hear your thoughts about that.
Okay. As I'm trying to keep all this together, let me get to Christy's point first. there's a book that was written probably 25 years ago. The title is 10,000 Ways to Reward Your Employees Without Costing You a Penny.
Wow.
In that
Nice.
it might be out of print.
10,000.
I mean, it's all these, well, it might not be 10,000, but
Yeah,
it's
no.
a myriad of what the point of the book was. There's a myriad of ways to reward, and I'm not talking about parking spots. Nobody gives a,
Right.
oops, I almost said something. Nobody cares about their name on a parking spot. If they do, they're in the wrong place anyway. Nobody cares about that. What people care about is from when they walk in, how they treated. And I'll make this point. I have gone to several companies, and see, I don't do surveys from employees. I don't care how big the company is. I went to one, and I found this out about maybe 20 years ago. I went to this company, I said, you know what? You come with me. This was a leader of the company. You come with me and let's go and kind of see how people come in, because they had to come in and punch a time clock or something like that. I can't remember, but I had him sit at the door with me for 30 minutes. I said, can you give me 30 minutes of your time? I didn't tell him what was going on. I said, just sit here with me for 30 minutes. We sat there, and then I turned to him and I said, let's go back to your office. I'm going to ask you a question. How many people did you say good morning? Wow, Peter, I'm not sure I heard anybody say good morning. And I said, that's the only survey I need about your company. You see, because, and this goes back to you, ma'am, what you were saying, as an HR person, you have to almost be one of the disciples. You have to, number one, HR people have to be incredibly courageous because you're fighting battles on several fronts. And that's the reason I told my wife, you go ahead and do that. I'm not interested in being nothing to do, but anyway, I digress. What you have to do is set yourself up as such a role model, and your staff in HR. And if you're an HR person who's just one person, well, you can kind of control all that. But most HR staffs have more than one person these days, correct? So you start in your own group. You start something in your own group. Guess what happens? Have you ever noticed that everybody talks? They should talk about things that are negative, don't they? Mm-hmm. But you know, they talk less about things that are positive. So it's about HR people. Do you have your moral compass set correctly? And I'm not I don't give people moral imperatives. I'm just saying, do you have your thing together about what you want your goal to be as an HR person? Now, I know you fight, it's like Sisyphus. We're pushing this big stone up this hill. And sometimes we get about halfway and it rolls back. Sometimes we get a little bit further and it rolls back, but it always rolls back, if you notice. Mm-hmm. Always. You know why it always rolls back? Because the people at the top simply won't listen. So I know as I wasn't mentoring my wife, but of course she went to all my classes and she knows communication theory backwards and forwards. But I was telling her, because you HR people talk to everyone. You just don't talk to, this certain culture here, certain culture here. Everyone's coming to you. So do you have the communication skills you need? Mm-hmm. That's the question. Mm-hmm. See, I'm starting at the HR level because everybody sees you. Because everybody, take it to HR. Go to HR. Where's HR? They in this meeting? Blah, blah, blah. Then you get all this stuff dumped on you. So I applaud all of you in HR, number one, before I go on, because you have to be so incredibly courageous, because you have forces from all sides hitting you. And I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. But my thing is, if you have a staff of HR individuals, have they been taught correctly? And here's what I also tell leadership, management, whatever. Please stop assuming people have skills they don't have. Why would you do that? And I try to remind, when I go to colleges, they say most college freshmen have to take a year of remedial stuff just to get up to snuff in college their freshman year. Think about that. So they haven't been taught anything in high school, especially in the state of Texas, but how to take a test. And I think most of you know what I'm talking about. Now, I don't know if that's the way in all states, but they're not taught critical thinking, which is part of what we talk about in the effective communication piece, how to be a critical thinker. They're just given fluff or peripheral stuff, so they're not prepared for the workplace. And here's one thing I have to say, and I want you to hear this because it'll probably hit in your mind. I coached all sports leagues in my life, probably 30 years ago, all sports leagues, basketball, football, baseball, it didn't matter what it was. Here's what I started to notice. Everybody started getting trophies. All us coaches were against it because why would you give everybody a trophy when you didn't win but 1 game out of 10? It didn't seem to make sense to us, but you have a whole culture of people who have been rewarded in their early lives for doing nothing. One of my friends said, what's all these 8th grade parties? So you graduated 8th grade. Aren't you supposed to graduate to 8th grade and go to the 9th grade? Why is it such a big deal? All this graduation, blah, blah, blah. You see, these are the mistakes that the baby boomers are responsible for, the changes in the education system, some of these other changes. People like me are the ones responsible for that. And I just let people know that right off the bat. But everybody, I think, can change if they want to, because you have, the tongue is the most dangerous weapon that you have. It destroys marriages, friendships. It makes you get fired from work. It makes you have conflict resolution, which these days is used at the end of the barrel of a gun. You don't know how to talk to people. If you get in an argument, it goes south real quickly because you don't have any skills. Why don't you have any skills as an adult? Why don't you have any skills at 25? What happened to you in these previous 25 years? So see, some of the things I'm talking about, I'm probably speaking to the choir. You already know these things. But the ways around them are to talk about these things in training, especially the generational stuff. All generations need to be in that room. And then we go in there and just start talking about how people grew up. When other people hear, and this is one of the biggest things that I do in training, especially when I'm in the room with people and have a little time, we don't talk about all this other things people talk about during training and just theory again, like I said. We talk about, how did you grow up? Because you find by asking people how they grew up, there's your empathy. That's where it starts, because guess what? I didn't grow up like you. I know you didn't grow up like me. And we talk about those things, those different things we face growing up. We talk about in gender communication, who was the leader in the household? Simple questions like this, because it determines you as an adult. Who took care of the bills? Who did most of the cooking? Who did this? Who did that? Mom, dad? You didn't have a mom, dad? Okay, grandma? Single parent? We get all that stuff out. And guess what happens after about 45 minutes when I'm in the room? People start kind of looking at each other going, well, that happened to me too, but it was just 20 years later. And this is how you get people together. Now, everything's Zoom these days. Most things everything's remote. It's a very hard, that's the reason I tell most people, you can't hire me, because my soft skills, and it's a wonder they call them soft because it's the hardest skills to have, but my soft skills training needs a person, and I used to train trainers. Oh God, I trained so many of them. And first thing I would tell them, you are not me. You can't be me. You can't do things like I do. You be you. I had one person tell me, well, Peter, you talk about your history a lot. I don't have a history. Oh, really? Where have you been the last 30 years? You have no history. But you see, what I'm trying to say here, and I'm kind of getting off tangent, but what I'm trying to say is important for each employee to have a way that they walk in the workplace. Don't care what you do at home. You go home and you put on whatever you want, do whatever you want, talk to people. Hope you don't do that. But at work, one of the classes I teach is called Civility and Respect in the Workplace. It's a little short thing that I teach just to get people reminded on you can't do anything with anybody unless they have a certain amount of respect for you. Well, how do they get respect for you, Peter? Well, it's the way you talk. It's the way you stand. It's the way you sound. So it's all these things that we have kind of glossed over, I think, in training, especially body language. Body language speaks 60% of what's going on. Just simply how you're standing, crossing your arms together, slouching, or whatever you're doing. So see, it's all these things that people forget about or have never been taught when they come to work. So of course, they're going to repeat the mistakes of the past.
Yeah, that's very true. That makes sense, Peter. I know that we're coming up on the end of our hour for the webinar. So I do want to say, anyone else, if you have any questions towards the end of the webinar that you want to quickly ask Peter before we head out. And Peter, if there's anything else, as we're closing out, any types of tools or exercises or things that the people on the call today could do to really start putting this into action. Yeah, if you can share anything like that we can kind of start right now once we hang up the call.
Sure. When you leave this session we have today, or when you go home this afternoon, or whatever you do, I want you to go up to a person that you would never talk to and simply say, for whatever reason, I've never had a chance to talk to you. I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm Peter Harrell, and I'd like to know a little bit about you. That's all you got to say. They'll go, no, maybe, yes. Most people I have found when you ask them to talk about themselves, I have to do this. I have to put up a cross and say, I don't want, people have told me things I never would have wanted to hear simply because I engaged them first. Or you can make up something saying, I'm doing a survey and I'm just trying to understand why communication has gone so bad. Do you have a couple of things you could tell me why that's happening? You get people to start thinking, and they'll usually tell you exactly what's on their mind. And here's the best thing that I could give anybody. When people tell you something, it's who they are.
Yep.
Remember that.
Mm-hmm.
People show you who they are in about 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can be fooled and you can be catfish and all these other terminologies we have. But for the most part, people are who they are when they say who they are, unless they're trying to run a game or, unless it's a con man or whatever. And so you catch people off guard and you do it in such a way that is so nice, they almost can't help but respond to you. Excuse me, do you have like 3 minutes just to talk to me? I'm trying to do this thing about effective communication. I'm trying to improve my communication. Can you help me? You go, well, how can I help you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just met you. And I figured that's a plus for me because I didn't know you before. See, it's all how communication is like a dance. It's all how you start the dance, but you got to know the steps. You can't get out there like we used to do in the 60s and just get out there and flail around. If you're doing ballroom dancing, when you have to know the steps, well, you have to kind of know the steps. But the steps are anything you can do to communicate with people you usually don't. Now, you do this one time today, if you choose to, you start to see something happen here. I call it psychological air. You can call it courage, you can call it whatever, because you will go, oh my, I've never done that before. I didn't die. Nobody else died. We talked for 3 minutes without argument. That's a pretty good day. And you just do things. That's how it flows. And you do this with your family, your relatives, with your boss, with peers on the same level as you, peers downstream from you. Doesn't matter. See, people, there's one guy used to say, well, I talk like this at home. When I come here, I do this at work. I had to make him understand. I try to get him to understand. Communication is holistic. It's not a silo. It's not vertical. It's holistic. It's like a spider's web. If you pull on a spider's web up here, what happens down here? It moves. So when you communicate properly in a couple of different things, you start to get psychological air, you start to get courage, you go on to the next new person, if you want to put it like that, or the next person. And this especially works with people you don't like. If you think I liked everybody I work with in all these workplaces, you would be insane. But they would never know it because I never showed it, because my face is either a flat effect or a smile. I have found smiles work better than anything. And one other thing I'd like to tell people, and I'm gonna say this in a nice way, shut the hell up. And what I mean by this, I just don't mean talking. Shut the hell up inside your head. Stop thinking while other people are talking about what you want to say. Say, I'm going to be a faithful communicator, and I'm going to stay only involved with what I hear. And you have to kind of do this as a physical thing in your head. I'm not going to let any thoughts come in. I'm not going to make any judgments. I'm just simply going to let them talk. And here's the thing. Sometimes I tell people, unless it's something serious or something to do with work, you can let people be wrong. You don't have to be right all the time. Nobody requires you to be right all the time. One of the best lessons I learned when I first had my son, he asked me something, and I would hear all these other people go, well, you can give all these things when the children were asking questions. I just tell my son, I don't know. But you know what? I'll get back to you because I'm going to go find out. And that's what I would tell people in my training on how to talk to other people. First, you got to become vulnerable. I'm trying to help myself communicate better. I've even given a class where I had like 100 rubber bands. People would come in the door and I said, put this on your wrist. They wouldn't know what it was about. Somebody finally said, Peter, why do we have to wear these rubber bands? Was it a fashion statement or something? And you know what I tell them? For the next 2 days, every time you interrupt someone while they're talking, take this rubber band, pull it out as far as it will, and let it go. You will stop interrupting people very quickly because see this little place right here on your wrist? It doesn't like pain. Now, for some people, you need to get those big postal rubber bands. They have to be this big because they have such a problem interrupting. But interrupting others, one of the biggest reasons we can't communicate. We can't hear what they're saying when we're interrupting. But this fast pace, what we live in, and see, I'm going back to live in Spring, Texas, and I've been in Mexico for 4 years. So I was just up there 2 weeks ago. I'm going to have to get used to all that pace again, because we don't do that here. People have time to spend 2 hours talking at dinner. They have time to see somebody on the street. Of course, well, most of us are retired here, but the same communication skills I was using before I retired, I'm still using now. I'm using them with you right now. I don't want to take up any more time. I hope I answered the questions and stated what you wanted me to do, ladies. But I'm just trying to give everybody here a little bit of the way that I have found to be successful in effective communication.
We appreciate that so much, Peter. I can't even begin to tell you how much I appreciate. I mean, I have taken notes and I'm so happy that this is recorded because I really want to be able to go back and watch it again. But we have gone several minutes over, so we want to go ahead and wrap up. And yeah, thank you so much. Do you you're a contributor with Thrive 360, and also is there any way that people can reach you should they want to learn more about what you do?
Well, let's see. I took my website down when I retired. I'm thinking about putting it back up. But I will tell you, I will be happy to give my email address out. I can give it here or write it to you so you can give it to
We
people.
can actually, if you want to give it to Christy, or I don't know if it's the one that I have, but if we
I'm going
can
to give you a
send it
different
in
one
the
that's not so cluttered.
notes.
I'm going to give
Okay,
you a different one, but I will send it to you after this meeting.
perfect.
If people have questions, they're welcome to. Like I say, I'm retired. They want to get me to start back working all the time, but that's not going to happen. But I have enough time to answer your questions if you, there's especially specifics about anything, about how to get any kind of these programs hopefully started, and maybe what they should entail. But I think I've kind of told you what my opinion of what they should entail are. So
Wonderful.
thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And Christy, as always, thank you. I'll make sure to put contact information for you as well, should anyone want to learn more about Thrive 360. So with that, we will go ahead and wrap for today. And thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Okay, thanks so much.
Peter. Thank you,
Oh,
Jen.
look for my new classes this fall. One will be on resiliency, one will be on generations.
Awesome.
All
Thank
right.
you so